Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited and welcome to the Proven Ways to Heal Inflammation Summit. And my name is Maureen Mongrain. I'm going to be your host throughout this summit. And I am so excited to introduce you to my very special guest today. And it's Dr. Seth Osgood. He is a DNP, FNP/BC, IFMNCP, and is a leader in functional medicine and the founder of Grassroots Functional Medicine, where he specializes in solving complex chronic conditions that conventional medicines care often overlooks. After his own battle with Lyme disease, marked by misdiagnosis and frustration with the traditional system, Dr. Osgood became driven to uncover the true root causes of illness. Today, he is known for his cutting edge approach to issues like chronic fatigue, gut dysfunction, hormone imbalance, a mold related illness, helping patients regain energy and clarity when nothing else has worked. A sought after speaker and educator, Dr. Osgood blends advanced science with a bold, no nonsense style that challenges the status quo of modern healthcare. He lives in Vermont with his wife and 5 children, where they run a farm raising longhorn cattle. And thank you so much for being here, Dr. Osborne. I am so excited for this
Oh, thank
interview.
you. I feel blessed to be a part of this summit. So thank you.
Yeah, well, okay. So the topic today is your labs are normal. So why do you still feel like hell? Which is that's that's true. The hidden inflammation nobody's testing for, and the root cause roadmap that actually works. So So tell us, Dr. Osborne, I know that you have been on both sides as a patient, as a clinician, and you've been told that your labs are normal. So how was that? And what, what do you hear from your patients on that?
Yeah, so just a little bit about my background. So
Sure.
it was several years ago. I had an experience that I really think was a blessing in itself. I'm so thankful that I went through it, even though it was one of the toughest times of my life. I was actually traveling back from Texas. My wife's from Texas, so we go down there every year for a road trip. And I was in the passenger seat. I remember waking up and the right side, I was taking a little nap, but the right side of my arm was completely numb. So I'm like, I just thought initially that I fell asleep and cricked my neck or something weird happened with my positioning. But then even on that ride, I started to notice numbness in my right foot. And then in my tongue started to feel numb. And I started to get over the next few days having spasms and muscle twitching, and I just started to freak out a little bit. And
Yeah.
so originally my mind right away, because I'm an outdoorsman, we have a farm. Vermont's notorious for ticks. My mind went right to Lyme disease, but there was something in me telling me there might be something more going on. So I was a little nervous. So I did what I shouldn't have done. I tested myself using the conventional Lyme test, and it was negative. So right away, my mind went to the worst place for that situation, which I was convinced that I had MS. So I just kind of was on a rampage to figure out what was going on because I knew if I had MS, time was of the essence and I wanted to act
Right.
fast. So I actually sought out multiple specialists. I think I saw 4 neurologists within a few weeks, just trying to get some answers of what was going on. And nobody was giving me any clarity on why I was having those symptoms. I actually ordered an MRI on myself because I couldn't get that, and it did show white matter changes that weren't there on a previous MRI I had, which is pretty classic with MS. And I actually went to the ER and said, "Hey, will you guys give me a lumbar puncture?" Because I wanted to know. Because even after seeing these neurologists, was getting no clarity. I even saw the MS specialist who originally didn't want to see me, refused to see me, and he looked me in the eyes and said, sometimes people think they feel numbness and tingling, but it's not really there. He said that to me. So that is the moment where I just knew that I was kind of on my own, and I took things into my own hands, and I did what I would do for many of my patients. I did the right testing, and lo and behold, I did have my IGeneX test, which is the testing we typically use for tick-borne illness, came back classically positive. It was CDC positive, but I also had antibodies to my myelin, and myelin antibodies are what are there with MS. So luckily, my lumbar puncture was negative, but what that revealed was that even though I had this Lyme, I had this tick-borne infection, it was morphing into some autoimmune issues. So that's where I just kind of I changed my whole tune. Initially because of the Lyme, I jumped on the antibiotics. I hit it hard. Nothing happened, which freaked me out a little bit because that's what we've always been taught
Yes.
to do. And that's where I was forced to take a different approach. And in what that I'm sure we'll talk a lot about a lot of those things today. But why I look at that as a gift is just because I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned a lot about what was important to me personally, spiritually, emotionally. I learned, a lot of new therapies that have helped me help a lot of my clients. And it's just been an outstanding gift. So it was incredible to see what people being on the other side. I've heard those stories from patients, about being ignored, being, dismissed, and to
Yes.
see it firsthand was another gift. And again, I'm not bashing anybody. I really do feel like the vast majority of clinicians want to help people, but when you're limited and your toolbox is a pharmaceutical, and that's all you got, either a surgery or a pharmaceutical, it sets you up for just telling people that it's either in their head or there's no answers or this is a part of getting older or all of the junk that people are left with that just robs them of hope. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. I'm happy to report that I'm doing really well today. But I just connect with my patients on such a different level now, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah, definitely, because you understand exactly where they're at, and you're also not gonna just leave them. Because in
Yeah.
a way, that's kind of what they're doing a little bit. They're leaving them like on a cliff or something. So you're not gonna do that. You're gonna fight for them, which is absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it feels isolating when you're dealing with something that doesn't have a lot of clarity or that people don't understand. It can be very isolating. It can rob people of their hope, and that's one of the most important things when you're dealing with an illness to recover is having the right mindset and having that support.
Definitely. Well, you have said that inflammation is not the enemy and that we have a sick care system, not a health care. So what exactly do you mean by that? And why is chronic inflammation leading in the cause of disease right now?
Yeah, I mean, I look at information as inflammation as a clue, right? It's the body screaming at us, telling us that something is out of balance, something is wrong. And unfortunately, in conventional medicine, that we fix those problems with pills that suppress the symptoms, but don't fix why that inflammation is there. People are given NSAIDs, steroids, and now these new biologics, and everybody's seen those commercials where it's you've got these drugs for rheumatoid arthritis or other autoimmune conditions or inflammatory conditions, and you hear the list of side effects, and it's worse than the original problem that you're dealing with. It's scary. So these things, again, all they're being prescribed to help people alleviate their symptoms, but it's not addressing why the problem is there in the first place. And that's the approach we need to take. It's like, if your smoke alarm is going off in your house, you can either, search for the fire and try to put out the fire, or you can take a hammer and just smash the smoke alarm. And I feel like that's what we're doing with inflammation. We're just smashing that smoke alarm. So the house still burns down, but it's a lot quieter, and that's what we're doing when we're not addressing why the problems are there in the first place. Chronic disease is huge in our society. Just to name some statistics, 3 in 5 deaths globally are related to chronic inflammatory diseases, and that's the World Health Organization. 6 in 10 adults have at least one chronic disease, and 4 in 10 have two or more. So that's pretty staggering. I mean, and this is all related to inflammation. That's at the root of it. Now that inflammation is there for different reasons, but that is the core, and that inflammation is a signal that is the body is trying to talk to us and tell us that something needs to be addressed, and we can either ignore it or we can try to figure out why that's there.
Definitely. Well, you've identified some of the hidden drivers, chronic inflammation and staph infections and in dysfunction. But why are these so often missed? And what's actually going on in the body?
Well, I think when we're looking at chronic inflammation, we have to take a very broad approach because everybody is there for different reasons. I like to give the analogy of the bathtub, where everybody's got their own bathtub. If you've got great genetics, you got a big bathtub. If you got not so great genetics, your bathtub's a little smaller. And negative influences from our environment will fill up that tub. Positive influences drain it out. And a lot of people, when they're coming in to the clinic, their tub is overflowing. And I always tell people, our job is simply to drain the tub. And I don't think we're that intelligent to where we find the one thing that is making everybody sick. I think what we're doing is we're removing some of those factors and we're optimizing physiology to where that water line comes down and the immune system can handle what's there. But there are so many drivers of inflammation. One of, as we talked about before, the infection piece is huge, these stealth infections. So
Yes.
to answer your question, I think one of the problems is that our testing for these infections that is traditionally available is not very good. And a lot of clinicians are not utilizing some of the testing that we know is a lot better. For Lyme disease, for example, we've got that traditional two-tier test with the ELISA and Western blot, and the research shows us about 57, I think is the stat on that. Might be a little more, a little less percent sensitive. So we're what that tells us is that we're missing a lot of Lyme out there. Whereas if we did a test through like IGeneX or some of these more advanced companies, the sensitivity increases to about 93 to 95%. So just by using the right test, we'll get so many more answers. And that's the case with all of the different infections out there. But we're taught to do one thing, and because everybody's so busy and they're seeing so many patients, they don't have time to go to the conferences and learn these things. And then insurance is always pushing back on doing the right thing. So it just, we get this standard of care, which is oftentimes, suboptimal.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. And we've all experienced it. I
Yeah.
know I have. And it is disheartening. It's so I can definitely see where it can really affect people mentally too, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's so many. The infection piece is really interesting to me, just because we've seen it kind of really expand over the last few years, especially since COVID. There's a lot more attention now going into how can these stealth infections influence chronic disease over time. There's still a lot of clinicians out there that believe that Lyme is just an acute issue, which is crazy to me. But they swear by it, and they'll argue till to the day is long. They'll argue with you, telling you that it's an acute issue. And a lot of people are hearing this when they go to their doctors. It's really frustrating. But there's new evidence coming out, about Lyme, about COVID, about Epstein-Barr. We're seeing how these problems can resurface and how they can reactivate when the immune system is suppressed and contribute to other inflammatory conditions down the road. Like there's an article that came out, I think in 2022, connecting Epstein-Barr and MS, which was very interesting. And it just showing that there was a significant increase in MS diagnoses in people who had Epstein-Barr. It was, I don't remember, it was like a 32-fold increase for MS in those. And they did it, it was a, I think it was a military study where they were able to track people over 20 years in their exposures. So it just, again, what was cool about that is that really it was one of those studies that blew the doors open to say, hey, these stealth infections can cause some pretty serious problems down the road that are outside of just the infection component, are related to the autoimmune component.
Sure.
And that's where I love that. I love that. I mean, it's just amazing what can happen in the body, and we just got to be open-minded about it.
Definitely. Well, I know you've talked a lot about the mitochondrial dysfunction and the environmental toxins as major drivers in fatigue and illness, and what can be done and what's happening with that.
Yeah, so the mitochondria is getting a lot of attention as well lately for good reason.
Yeah.
I love it. I love to hear about mitochondria. And
Yes.
and what's cool about mitochondria is it just makes sense, right? We know that they are the batteries of the cells, and they are easily influenced by so many different factors, by our stress, by our emotions, by our environment, by toxins, by infections, by our nutrients and our microbiome health, and when they become impaired and our cells don't work well, that is what can oftentimes lead to disease, and that will just manifest in different ways depending on genetic susceptibility and what the triggers actually are. But when I think of fatigue, which is probably the number one symptom that we hear from people today, is they're tired, right? That's what causes a lot of people to seek out help because they can't do the work that they want to do. They can't focus with the way they know they should. They're missing out on time with their loved ones, with their family, the things that really matter most in life. A lot of times that fatigue is the big driver for them to seek out that root cause approach. Fatigue is not a is not just a symptom. It is a sign of something that is going wrong, and that is we need to look at it as, look for the why of the fatigue, and that's a lot of times what people aren't doing. Like, it's easy to throw out a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome or some of these other idiopathic diagnoses people receive, but again, all they're doing is they're putting them on this trajectory of pills and therapies that do nothing to resolve why it's there. When I think of fatigue, I think of mitochondrial dysfunction, and that's where we have to have to do that deep dive and figure out what's tapping it, what's draining those mitochondria. It's crazy. I think it's like the 1 quadrillion mitochondria in your body, or some astronomical number. And there's so many things that influence the health of those mitochondria. And those are the things we need to be going after. Because if you can improve mitochondrial health, it doesn't matter what the label is, you're going to feel better.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It can change everything in someone's life. And I think, and I'm sure you touch on this, but I mean, sleep is a really big deal because sometimes people will wake up and they're still fatigued. So that,
Absolutely. That is a big red flag that something is wrong. Brain fog is another big one. How many people say they have brain fog? Like, brain fog is a sign of mitochondrial dysfunction as well. That is inflammation. You don't get a headache when your brain is inflamed. You get brain fog, cognitive impairment. These are the things that we need to be thinking about. And that's another top one that everybody struggles with these days. And I remember that was the first time I got brain fog was when I was have Lyme. And man, if you haven't experienced that, it is debilitating when you can't think, when you can't put words together. It will wreck you.
yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a scary thing
It
because
is.
yeah, definitely. And I feel for people that have that. But so what is the nervous system dysregulation? Why is it missing that piece and healing? And how does the trauma? I know they kind of go together. Um, keep the body stuck in the fight or flight, the survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny with the nervous system, back several years ago in practice, we would like save the nervous system piece till the very end. Like with the people who wouldn't respond to anything, they just weren't recovering, they weren't getting better, we weren't seeing improvement. We'd throw the nervous system piece at them as a last ditch effort, and what we found is that those people got better. So as opposed to waiting until the very end, what I found personally, and I know a lot of my colleagues have, is addressing the nervous system in the beginning can just accelerate recovery to a whole nother level. When your body is stuck in fight or flight, which it is for many people, especially if you're dealing with chronic illness, people, they're in that fight or flight state. In the body, the nervous system almost becomes comfortable there. So even when you're doing the right things and you're healing and you're proving, sometimes your nervous system will pull you back to that state of being unwell, the state of being in danger, in that danger zone, which will hinder recovery. I mean, if you've had physical trauma, emotional trauma, sexual abuse, if you had chronic illness, if you've been dismissed, who has most people that are walking and talking in our world today have some sort of limbic system or nervous system dysfunction. So if people are struggling out there, I just highly recommend you look into some of the programs that are, and there's a lot of them now. That's what's really cool. There's a lot of programs that are designed that people can do on their own at home in front of a computer, without going anywhere or seeing anybody. And these are programs that I recommend to our clients all the time. Things like Primal Trust or DNRS. There's Gupta. There's a lot of them out there. You got to figure out what one works well for you. But if you can get the nervous system to calm down and recognize that your body is safe and it's going to be okay, and it's in a place for healing, that is where magic happens. And it's just something you got to do consistently. It's not a one and done, just like exercise or any of the stuff that really works, right? You got to be consistent. But I am a huge fan of limbic system work and nervous system work.
Oh yeah, it's powerful. And I know that sometimes, like, depending on the person and how sensitive they are or something, things can happen in childhood and it can
Mhm.
stay stuck. And I'm sure you've encountered that before.
Yeah, and it's physiology. It's not just, sometimes I feel like we just say stress or trauma and we think it's almost a psychological issue, and it is absolutely not. It's a physical nervous system issue. We know when you go through trauma, especially in childhood and throughout your early years, that chronic stress will increase interleukin 6 and TNF alpha and CRP, these
Yes.
markers of significant inflammation that are closely tied to chronic disease. It disrupts the HPA axis, it depletes the microbiome, it impairs the mitochondria, it reactivates these dormant infections. There's so much that the stress does to our physiology that sets us up for problems. And if we don't address that, then we're just going to be spinning our wheels.
Yeah, because what I see is that um the nervous system, that is the regulator. Am I
Mhm.
right?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I think it's a great thing to start with that. But it's interesting that you said when you were going through medical school,
Yeah.
they saved it to last, and maybe but then maybe it was the sign of the times too. I mean, even 5 years ago, things have changed, or
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, I think COVID is, again, as catastrophic as it was, it's done a lot for our field, you know what I mean, for medicine. And it's like, oh, I know a lot of patients really, it's that working on the nervous system and the limbic system that really have taken them out of that state of long COVID. It's really helped alleviate a lot of their symptoms. Which is just very interesting to see that connection there again. And I think it's all just related to what that stress does on physiology and what it sets you up to struggle with.
exactly. Well, you said normal. Lab ranges can be very misleading. And what are some common labs that may look normal but are actually warning signs? They're
Yeah,
telling
that's
us
a
something.
yeah. So labs are tough. Like I love labs. I love testing because what lab work does is it gives us clarity on imbalances and where those weak spots may be that we need to address. But labs are only as good as the person who are evaluating them as well. If you look at a lot of the numbers on the standard labs, these ranges are ridiculous. And a lot of people don't know that, but the ranges are just the average from the population that's being tested, and they go a couple standard deviations in each direction. And most of our population isn't real healthy. So we're pulling from a group that isn't the best group to pull from, and then we've got these huge ranges that don't make a lot of sense. I mean, I see people. So just for specifics, one of the big ones is thyroid, right? A lot of people are coming in with a TSH that's 4 or 5, and their doctor's telling them that everything's normal, that it's not their thyroid. When I like to see it between 0.5 and 2, or you get a vitamin D of of 31, and they're saying that that's sufficient, where we want to see that closer to 80. Ferritin, which is a marker of iron, especially for women out there, that's a huge one that a lot of people don't even run, but that is a marker of iron storage. And if you look at the range on that, it can be anywhere from like 11 to 250, depending on the lab. And again, most people need to be sitting in the around 100. So people, and the list goes on and on and on. There's
Sure.
the range, the lab range, the high and low, which really in most situations doesn't mean a whole lot. And then there's the functional or optimal range. And you just want to make sure you are interpreting your labs from that space. Even if your doctor doesn't know, how to interpret from those spaces, you need to know what you're looking at there. And there's a lot of great resources to help you do that now. And then educate people. We don't learn this, so it's like, don't be scared to approach your physician, approach your clinician and say, hey, I have learned that this might actually be below an optimal level. What are your thoughts on that? And I think the vast majority of people are going to work with you and talk to you about that. But if they don't, it just means you got to find someone else. It's not a big deal.
Yes. Oh,
Your
for
health
sure.
is the most valuable asset you have, so you got to take it seriously.
Definitely. Well, tell me, at your grassroots clinic, you use advanced approaches that many clinicians, many others do not kind of overlook. So, what's possible today with hormone optimization as well as root cause medicine that we were talking about?
Yeah, so there's so that's what's cool about the body and integrative and functional medicine is a lot. I am all about having a big toolbox, because what I have learned over the years and with myself personally is that the standard approaches don't always work, right? So you got to do something different. If we keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, right, that's insanity. So we got to do something different. If what you're trying, even with our current clients, if something we're doing isn't working, we're going to do something different. And that's why I like to have that big toolbox. I love, the first step is to remove the inflammatory triggers, and to work on optimization. And that's a big job in itself.
Sure.
Optimization could be the microbiome balance. It could be hormones. It could be optimizing, nutrient deficiencies. There's so many things, and that's where that testing, in my mind, is so important, because we like to cast the broad net, see where those imbalances
Sure.
are, start addressing them, and if that's not working, we got to move on to other things. And that's where, as I mentioned before, I don't know if I actually talked about it, but one of the things that helped me when I was going through my struggle were the peptides. Peptides were, and that's a big class, a
Oh,
big broad category of things in itself. But peptides were what helped me with some of my neurological symptoms more than anything. So I delved into those, and I found those to be very useful. People are peptides are getting a lot of attention right now because of
yeah, they
the
are.
weight loss peptides that are out there, like tirzepatide, retatrutide, and semaglutide, which again I'm a fan of, believe it or not, in the right dose at the right time for the right person with the right supervision. But there are thousands of peptides out there, and they all do something different. So they're just signaling molecules. Their peptides are just amino acids that come together to signal the body to do something different. So for me, I use a lot of peptides for immune regulation, a lot of anti-inflammatory peptides, and they were extremely helpful. Though I used a peptide for a neuropathy because I had a lot of the numbness and tingling, and it was the only thing that really made the difference, and it was pretty quick. But we use peptides in our office all the time. I think they are getting good attention, which is a great thing. But a lot of times, again, people are getting these peptides from the wrong places. They're buying them online. They're getting them from the black and gray market, and that's a scary thing because you don't always know what you're getting. But there are good compounding pharmacies out there who are doing a great job with some of these peptides.
Sure.
getting them from clean sources, testing them for potency, purity, and contaminants, I'm a fan. In addition to everything else, that like with the sleep, with the gut health,
Sure.
with the nutrition, you got to hit it from all angles because nothing works by itself. We always want that quick fix and that single solution, but is in my opinion just doesn't exist.
Yeah, definitely. And to do things consistently. That's
Yes, yes.
another one. And some people say, well, do you have to do things all the time? I'm all, well, while you're healing, you do, because that's the
Yeah.
beauty of the natural world.
Exactly. That's what I tell them. We are working to develop a lifestyle that is conducive to your body being healthy. So if we go back to living the lifestyle that was previously lived, where your body was unhealthy, logically we can't expect to stay in that same state. So it truly is a shift of mindset, which leads to a shift in lifestyle, and that's where you get the best results.
Definitely. And it can only help them. But sometimes when people are in the midst of things, sometimes they got to see it too, and
Yeah,
sometimes it's a little challenging, but I
we're
can
only
tell
human.
you're a doctor that's willing to work, and hey, so that's a lot of integrity there. So for someone who feels like they've tried everything, they just can't get anywhere, what does the grassroots, like the healing approach in the clinic, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, so our approach is a little bit different. We work with people over time. So I have worked in a lot of different healthcare models. I started out in acute care, ER and ICU, and even went to primary care and different functional clinics as well, where there were a lot of different models. And what I found and what I still stick with today is working with people over an extended period of time because nothing with chronic disease is quick. It is a journey. I like to evaluate things in seasons. So we typically work with people anywhere from 8 to 12 months at a time, and then we will continue to work with them. We've got a lot of patients we've been with for a long time. But the very first step is to listen to somebody's story. I think that is so crucial. As much testing as we do, I learned so much from just sitting across from somebody, looking in their eyes, and listening to their story from the moment they came into the world up until present day. Looking at their stressors, their traumas, their triggers, their infections they've endured. All of that is extremely helpful to just get those clues on, what could be out of balance, where do we need to look. And then from there, it's all about investigating, so investigating through story and then investigating through testing. I'm a big fan of comprehensive testing because, again, that a lot of people that come to our clinic have been struggling for years, been tossed around from doctor to doctor, and they don't know where to start. They don't know what's going on. They've been run through the ringer. They're losing hope. And so having some concrete tests that are reproducible to show where those imbalances and infections are, give them a sense of hope that I'm not making this up. This isn't in my head. There's something that we can actually do about it. So we're a big fan of investigating and then working on, like I said, removing those triggers, repairing the any imbalances with the mitochondria, with the gut, with the nutrients that are depleted, using some of those outside of the box therapies like peptides and hormones and low dose immunotherapy and some of the integrative tools. We have a lot of tools at our clinic like hyperbaric and red light and PMF. I love using all of these modalities because it just accelerates the results without causing problems. There's no side effects to most of this stuff. It's literally just promoting healing. And then, of course, the last thing that I always promote, even though I'm doing it at the very beginning, is the nervous system work and retraining, the nervous system to bring it back to a state of feeling safe. And because if the nervous system doesn't feel safe, it's hard for the body to recover.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that because that's a real big one. And there's a lot of people that are living in that fight or flight. And like you said, they don't even
Yeah,
know of them. They start thinking that that is your personality when these things come up. That's just and it's not. It's things that need to be uncovered.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, for someone who's been dismissed and told everything just looks fine, what would you want what would you want them to hear today? What would you want them to take away with?
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. I know personally how that feels. And, it's just, like I said, you feel like you're on an island sometimes, all alone, and then you start to question your sanity a little bit. Is this real? Is it really? Is it in
Yes.
my head? Am I making this up? I've been there as well, and it's terrifying. I would say, you know your physiology better than anybody, better than any test, any doctor, any blog article or chat search. You know when something is out of whack, and you got to trust that instinct, and then you've got to make sure that you've got your foundations in a place where your body is going to heal. No matter what the cell infection, whatever the hormone imbalance, no matter what the sexy peptide is you want to throw into the mix, if you're not eating the right food, if you're not sleeping, if you're not dressing the nervous system, if you're not moving, it's very hard for your body to recover. So focusing on those foundations, and then find a team who can help you through this, who can partner with you, because that's what this is. It's a partnership. That when you're working with a healthcare provider, it needs to be a partnership, because you guys are working together to get to the bottom of this. And it's going to have ups and downs. You're going to have good days and bad days. But ultimately, what we're looking to see when we're dealing with chronic disease is those good days start to become more frequent, and those bad days become less frequent. And then we're starting to see changes in seasons where your summer is better than your spring, your fall is better than your summer. That is what I would recommend. You just can't give up. You got to believe in something bigger than yourself, whether that is God, or whether that is some other spiritual. You have to. You can't do this alone. You have to, and that's something that came for me, is like it really strengthened my spiritual beliefs, and that was a huge part of my recovery. I have no doubt, and I'm just so grateful for that. You can't do this by yourself. You got to have a team. You got to have something bigger than you. It's so crucial when it comes to the healing journey.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, I really like the fact that you spend time and you said uh what they tell you about themselves is the most important. And so that's information for
Hmm.
you. And you can only get that from that direct person, because when someone comes to you at that state, they're they're going to be so honest, because you know, I know someone once said, if you're healthy, you don't have any problems. If you're not healthy, you got problems.
Exactly. And it's so one of the best, because we spend about 2 hours in that initial consult talking with people. And it's
Wow.
amazing how therapeutic it is for people,
Yes,
just because, again, it reaffirms just how much they have been through. And I always like to end it saying, well, wow, it's just amazing to see how strong you are. Look at what you've come through. Look at the
that's so
challenges
great.
that you've seen, that you've overcome. You can do this. It just reinstates how amazing the body is and what it can endure without breaking down.
Oh yeah. No, the body is so smart. I always say the body is so smart.
It is. There's no doubt. That's a true statement.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a very generous free gift of Fixing Chronic Fatigue, and it's an educational ebook, I believe,
Yep.
exploring overlooked causes, fatigue, hormones, inflammation, nutrient deficiency, all the things, nervous system overload, and supports healing and renewed energy, which we talked about earlier, which is so important. So
Yeah, it's just a
it's
great little guide to give some ideas on where you may look, different modalities that are used, because there's so many things out there. And again, it's easy to get pulled in one direction or another based on what's coming through the social feed. But what's important to remember is that if something doesn't work, you just got to find something else that does. And there's
yeah,
a lot of really great options, and things that you want to explore. And that's why I love the fatigue piece, as we mentioned, because there's just so much to that. It's not just a label. It is a sign of an imbalance. And that's what you want to go after, because if you don't address what's actually wrong, you're going to be, stuck on a gazillion pharmaceuticals without any true relief.
Yeah. Dr. Osgood, do you do Zoom calls? Do you do consults that way?
Yeah, yeah, we do. So I'm licensed. It depends. So per regulations, you're supposed to be in a state of license. So I'm licensed in Florida, Texas, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. So usually, if we're going to establish care where we are going to prescribe something like a peptide or a hormone, you have to at least initiate care in a state that we're licensed in. If we're not prescribing, then we can do it virtually, and it's fine. But I have patients that sometimes will just fly in to see us for that first consult, see our practice, and meet our team, and then we just follow up virtually from there. That happens a lot.
Okay. Well, this sounds it's just absolutely wonderful. Now, have you always been a functional medicine, or you said you worked in ER, I think, was it in the
Yeah, so I've done about a little bit of everything. So I started off actually in high school as an EMT, and then went to paramedic school, got my degree, went back to nursing school, went and got my bachelor's, and then my master's, and then my doctorate. I've done primary care, I've done ICU, ER, a little bit of
Okay.
everything, and then I ended up in functional medicine, and I'm so thankful I did. But what I do appreciate, and I'm grateful for that experience, because it is important to see the other side, and what happens. And that was part of the reason it just motivated me to want to do this. And it's a true blessing.
Well, I love the philosophy of functional medicine. I think it's just the most natural, close to what the body is than pretty much anything else. And
The body does the healing. It's not any provider. It's the body, and the changes you make. We're just there to facilitate those changes.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I so appreciate it. And it's just, I could talk to you longer than this. It's so nice. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom with the audience. And I know they are pushing it. And so, yeah, thank you so much, audience, for being here today. And we will see you tomorrow.
All
Thank you
right,
so
appreciate you. Thank you.